Hey everybody, welcome to the morning market briefing. It's Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. Lots to talk about today. We've got an India-U.S. trade deal. We've got some movement in the M&A space continuing and some observations on the cycle. But let's jump in, Ben. Let's lead off because I think the most exciting thing here from a content standpoint is SpaceX and XAI. This merger we alluded to last week. Gave a little bit of a update on it yesterday, and it's starting to come to fruition. Tom, what are your thoughts, structure, all of this?
I mean, I think the most fun thing about it is that they're talking about using the ticker XXX because you got X.com, XAI, and SpaceX all in one company when they potentially IPO in the summer, which is pretty. I mean, it's very on the nose for Elon Musk, who likes to throw around 420 jokes and things like that. I mean, I'm interested to see if they move forward with the Tesla merger, though I guess that's off the table. He says it this morning, but
I think that's still on the table.
Is it? I mean, it's interesting to me because I think that the dropping of the two models of Tesla. I mean, the writing's on the wall. China's cranking out low quality electric vehicles all over the place and gaining a ton of market share. The robots thing could be really interesting if you could actually get it off the ground, and I think merging it with SpaceX is how you get it off the ground, literally. You know, because you basically have the manufacturing and the power side that's Tesla. You've got the connectivity and launching abilities of SpaceX, and then you've got Grok and X, of course, is sort of a separate thing. But you basically build the robots, power the robots, put the artificial intelligence in the robots, and then you send them to the moon. And guess what? They can work 24/7. They're connected to Starlink in the same way that we are. And we start building space colonies, and bingo bongo, Tesla could become, the East India Trading Company.
They do it all.
We haven't had a company that's out there exploring new lands and conquering those resources in 300 years, 400 years. So I mean, it could be, if it all came together in a way that actually worked. I mean, I think the upside is in the trillions. I mean, it could be like founding the Americas if you could actually get to the moon and mine on the moon or live on the moon or live on Mars and mine Mars. Is it a real moonshot, pun intended? Yes, I think it is. But I think there's a lot of value there to having one company run by one guy where all of these things have synergistic effects. And then you get all the engineers that have done an unbelievable amount of work in a short period of time. I mean, Tesla's grown to it's $1.3 trillion over the last, call it 20 years, 25 years, but all these other companies have come to rise in the last 5 to 10 years. And, you could argue that SpaceX is worth somewhere around $1 trillion. XAI, which didn't exist 5 years ago, is worth 250, they say.
Yeah, that's a 3-year run from 0 to 250.
I mean, that's huge. I mean, I think 250 billion is 5 GMs. I always think of GM because GM is perpetually a $50 billion company. So, but I mean, how many S&P 500 companies are over 250 billion? It's
less
few.
than 50.
Yeah. So it's bigger than Starbucks. I mean, a lot of companies you've known for a long time, you think, man, that's a big company, are just crumbs compared to some of these value creation
It's bigger than Pepsi. It's bigger than United Health.
Which is crazy to think about.
It wasn't maybe a year ago, but now it is.
I do wonder if, I mean, the valuations on these things, like, oh, well, this is worth about $1 trillion. This is worth about $250 billion. Slap them together, 4-to-1.
Yeah.
All stock deal.
I mean, how would that work for Tesla stock? And Ben, you're smarter about equity stuff than I would. But if Tesla's worth, call it 1.3 trillion, then you say, hey, we're going to merge this private situation, the Triple X company. You merge that into Tesla. Are you issuing new shares? How does the valuation come together? Because in theory, it would immediately be worth $2.5 trillion.
So every SpaceX shareholder gets a share of Tesla.
But how do we rise to that valuation?
You have the same number of shares. You have double the number of shares outstanding.
And they're all worth the same.
They're all worth the same.
Interesting.
Theoretically.
Yeah, this seems like there'd be some sort of arbitrage situation, or Tesla stock suddenly people would want to get that access and they'd fire at a Tesla stock.
And the whole thing would rise.
Yeah, so you go to $1,000 a share, and then everyone who has a share of SpaceX gets $1,000 worth of Tesla, and the result is call it a $3 trillion company. The functionality of this is so odd and unusual and unprecedented. It's kind of hard to know how that would play out.
It's interesting to me. I mean, I'm curious to see I do think Elon's doing a good job of front running some of these major IPOs. Not front running in a non-compliant sense, but just really pushing these things through, thinking a little bit more creatively than others. I'm curious if we do get the XXX ticker, if we get a Vin Diesel ad for XXX. Gotta get Vin Diesel back out there.
For those under the age of 35, XXX has a second meaning. You wouldn't know what it is because all that stuff is readily available on your phone, but it used to be something that was discussed quite a bit in middle school in the early 90s.
India trade deal, Ben, lowering the tariffs from 25 to 18%. Not a whole lot of coverage on this, but this is pretty significant.
Yeah, I think it's a good deal. I think it's a surprising deal that it came right now. I didn't think that it was really on the cards that we were even really negotiating strongly with many countries. So taking it down, and India is going to commit to purchasing $500 billion of U.S. products like energy and the like. So I think it's a good deal. Just right back. Just one thinking on the space and SpaceX and Grok stuff. And I think this is kind of Elon's MO, is that he might have a end point that he wants to get to with any of this stuff. Like maybe he wants robots mining on Mars. I don't know. But in the interim, he has a plausible path to profitability, and that is have data centers in space. And so have a constellation of data centers in space. And frankly, if you're doing all the computations, if you just have an LLM that's headquartered in space using solar power, it's doing all of its things. It doesn't really need to shoot data back to Earth. So as long as it can just kind of be its kind of own local closed loop, then I think you have something that could be pretty interesting, because then you don't have to deal with as much cooling. It's pretty cold in space.
That's what they say.
You don't need as much energy because you can rely on solar power. And I think it probably would be a little bit more efficient to run, and certainly that's Elon's whole thing. Now, if you need to switch out NVIDIA chips every 18 months, it might be a little bit cost prohibitive.
Gonna need more rockets.
But in the short term, I think that he has a plausible path to profitability, and I think that's why Elon can make these things work for longer than a lot of these other guys who promise the world.
He gets a lot more runway than an OpenAI company we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I did read a tweet thread that was talking about the plan for those as they replace them is, instead of having a decaying orbit, so eventually when those things become obsolete, they'll crash into the atmosphere and burn up, that the idea is that they're going to have some sort of system where they will self-jettison themselves towards the sun. It's like, it was called like heliocentric destruction system, which is, once they're done, they fire them off. And they
file that under the long list of things that make dudes say, hell yeah.
Yeah. The question is, though, if matter can neither be created or destroyed, if you start building tons of satellites and then you send them to the sun, that's really tough for the recycling bros. Because he's like, man, we're running out of lithium. It's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have shot all those satellites directly into the sun.
Also, I mean, astrophysics is a long time ago for me, but if you shoot something to the sun, does it actually go into the sun, or does it just go into orbit around the sun?
Or would it just turn into molecules that, I mean, at a certain point, everything would burn, right? Or at least evaporate.
The sun is hot. The sun's hot.
But space is cold, and it's also a vacuum.
The sun is hot, though.
Yeah. So there's a lot. I have a lot of questions about space, because you think it would be hotter as you got closer to the sun, but it's technically colder outside the atmosphere.
There was a good line in Elon's
doesn't make a lot of sense
page when he wrote about this merger, saying, the great thing about space is that there's a lot of space.
That's true.
There is a lot of space up there.
It's a little too on the nose.
Yeah. But like, if you said who said that, Elon Musk would be on the short list for sure. Ben, curious your thoughts. We got a very robust ISM manufacturing report yesterday, surprisingly strong. Curious where you're kind of seeing the economy right now with what you're reading, things that are going on. There's tons of noise right now, lots of volatility on individual stock names. We'll get to that, but taking bit of a breath here. How do you read into that report?
It's incredibly noisy, and I think that a lot of people aren't believing this manufacturing report that we got yesterday. New orders basically had its biggest month since early 2022. I mean, that's coming up on 4 years now, pretty much 4 years actually, in terms of manufacturing new order strength. And there was some questioning of, is this related to tariffs, and the comments weren't incredibly favorable. Pricing didn't really go up, and so people are saying, should we really read into this? And I think the end result is the economy has exited 2025 being pretty strong, and I think that a lot of companies are not ready to make that call. And we've had some weather issues last couple weeks, and so you've seen a lot of companies provide guidance that's a little bit more muted. Again, we talked about this at the time, but in December, analysts were just ratcheting up expectations dramatically for a lot of these companies, and I think that we're really in a good spot to move forward. But I think a lot of companies who are forward thinking are resetting expectations a little bit more.
On the earnings side, we got another novel from Palantir. What were your favorite quotes in there?
Probably the last one. So first of all, Palantir up 11%. I mean, they're just absolutely crushing it. They're growing 100% in their government business, and that's the slow-growing business. Commercial, I think it's up 150%, so more than double year over year. They said. So they say a couple things. First of all, they open our financial results, those crude and imperfect metrics by which a market filled with both excitement and fear attempts to assess the value of the companies it covets, have again exceeded even our most ambitious expectations. And then it closes with a degree of humility, and finding that drop of humanity in one's opponent can be a lethal advantage.
Sometimes I wake up and I just cannot believe how amazing I am. And then I remember to be humble. Those are the bookends there. I mean, they're up 11%, so
they're doing really well. I thought Rick Reeder had a good assessment of where we are in the market, and I think that it speaks well to what we're seeing today. So now that he's done with the interview process as being Fed chair, he came out with a big
back to work
report. And a couple things that he said. First of all, prices are fraying. They're coming down. I mean, Pepsi today announced 15% price cuts on things like Cheetos and a lot of Frito-Lay. 15%. That follows General Mills basically cutting prices across its entire suite of products. So I mean, that's remarkable. So Rick Reeder basically saying, inflation's kind of done. Not worried about that. What he is a little bit more concerned about is the jobs market. And Jonathan, I think if we have jobs versus GDP. We can see that on the chart. You see GDP really accelerating to the upside while jobs growth is, pretty weak. And this is not something that we've historically seen. And so you look at that, and you do kind of wonder about the jobs market and if we do need interest rate cuts, or even if interest rate cuts would help in terms of hiring. But a lot of companies are reporting earnings growth and sales growth and job cuts. And then the last thing he did talk about fixed income being a really good ballast for the portfolio, but probably the more interesting thing here is that EPS growth of companies in the S&P 500, and I think we have a chart on that too, Jonathan. We have, when you have 10% plus EPS estimates for the S&P 500, your middle of the bell curve in terms of the range of potential outcomes for the average company is higher than normal. And you can see that in the green, the middle of that is higher. But the distribution of outcomes, it has excess kurtosis, which is basically saying you have very fat tails.
Fat tails.
So, and we're seeing that, I mean, Palantir up 11%, and then you've got other companies like PayPal down 16% today. PayPal, interestingly, has fallen from $300 to $44 in the last 5 years, as it just completely moves into obsolescence.
I mean, I feel like we're seeing that kind of across the board with the broadening, where you're seeing a lot of companies performing well year to date, stuff up 6, 7, 8%, but the ones that are not performing are just getting hammered.
Pfizer, you know, they just wasted a ton of money on Pfizer, and Merck actually just blew through a ton of money on acquisitions, and both of them are getting hammered because their acquisitions aren't doing anything.
All right. Any closing remarks? We got a weird week of calls. We got Tom finally back in the saddle. Before we close up, I want your take just on the Fed appointment.
Yeah, I think I listened to the call throughout, and it's a little unusual because the Kevin Warsh thing, you know, going back to the who they're going to choose as a menu, I think the ICE stuff and the headlines really pushed the administration away from Rick Reeder. I think that he was the most interesting thing on the menu, but I think this is not a time that you need to be taking big swings just with all of the negative headline risk just around, you know, Minnesota really specifically. And so you're not going to go bland. You're not going to get the chicken. So they settled on the steak. But I think that Kevin Warsh is an interesting choice. You know, notably, he was basically Bernanke's right-hand man during QE, and he's since had some mea culpa on that, saying, hey, maybe quantitative easing wasn't the best idea, and we're probably not going to do that again. And I think the way to read it is not that he's hawkish. I mean, at first everyone's like, oh, he's a dove. He started QE. Now, oh, he's a hawk. But he's been pretty adamant about a regime change at the Fed, you know, eliminating a lot of that mission creep that Scott Bessent has talked about. So I would expect him to be less forward guiding. I think we're probably going to expect him to modulate rates as needed. So I don't think he's necessarily 100% in on somebody like Stephen Baran, where it's like, hey, we're just going to cut rates to zero because we want to get rates down. But I think he'll look around and say, hey, we're going to cut 50 basis points because that's probably where we need to be. I mean, the Rick Reeder stuff, I think, indicates we probably need to cut rates a little bit. I don't think it's going to have as much of an effect as people think. But I think he's looking around and saying, hey, but if inflation ticks back up, or we need to modulate unemployment, or we need to do things that will help a particular part of the economy that's seeing real stress, I think he'll modulate accordingly and not be like, oh, well, here's 2 years worth of guidance on where we're going to be on the federal funds rate, because I think that traps you. When the Fed's like, I mean, they kind of got trapped all the way along the line. I think it's actually something that's a real problem with Jay Powell is they put out these surveys of economic projections, and they're like, oh, well, in the first half of 2022, we actually expect inflation to get back down to 2%. Well, in what earth is that going to happen when you're at 9 in the summer of 21? You know, you need to be more honest about where things are, which they haven't really been. You need to be more proactive about what needs to be done, which they haven't been, and stop creating problems that then you anoint yourself as a hero to fix. Let's work on preventative care as opposed to, you know, being in the emergency room all the time with the Fed. And so I think that that's the flavor that we're going to get from Warsh. You know, rates are up a little bit on the news. I don't know that that's necessarily fair. And, you know, I think that things like gold and Bitcoin have obviously gotten whacked as a result too, which I think is actually fair because, you know, if you're just printing money, then things that are measured in money are going to go up in price. You know, the thing is gold never really changes in value. Everything around it changes. So if you devalue the dollar, which is, you know, ounces per dollar, well, guess what? You're going to get a larger number of dollars per ounce. And so I think that that's the way to think about it. And so if you're going to be printing less money, you're going to be, you know, less aggressive with your Fed moves, then yeah, gold should probably come down because the value of everything else is projected to now be worth more, and the value of gold is going to stay the same. And I think that goes for Bitcoin or any other sort of static measured in dollars, you know, speculative asset. So that's where I'm at on that. Also, breaking news: my brother has a son born this morning. 9 pounds, 15 ounces. So a lot of people are saying
couldn't quite get to 10.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that's a big baby. Not in my family. As another nine and change.
Do we
pounder.
have a name?
James Miles Russell.
James Miles.
So congratulations. He's the only heir to the name at this point. So. Man. Need to get him up. Need to get him reproducing ASAP.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown of the Russell throne. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Congrats, Mike. James, thanks for joining us. All right, talk to you guys soon.